Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sportfish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Find bird. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm your host, Jim Harkin. On this episode, we'll look at the new Conservationist Committee. Then we'll head to the Ben Avery Range and get a flavor for all the activities at this year's expo. But first, we get to go up north and play in the rain. Oh yeah, and we get to check in on a safe harbor program for an endangered frog. Recently, the first Chiricahua leopard frogs were released in northern Arizona.
Oh, there he went.
As part of the Arizona Game and Fish Department's new program, which enlists the help of non-federal landowners to conserve threatened species. More than 30 frogs, including adults and tadpoles, were released into a protected pond on private property near Sholo.
Good, good. Oh, it was exciting. We've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'd ran into Wade and we had talked to him. He was looking at the pond and stuff, and so we got to talking about all kinds of different things, and he said, you know, Dan in my office ought to see this pond because this would be a great place for the frogs. And so Martha and I were talking about it after they left, and they go, you know, boy, that would be a good idea, and we'd be able to give something back to nature, so to speak, in a small way.
It's like I'm ready for freedom.
The frogs for this inaugural release came from a breeding stock that originated from the Three Forks area of the Apache Sitgraves National Forests.
There he went.
At the Pine Top Regional Office, we have some facilities on loan from our fisheries department, actually. They've been very generous in allowing us to use some raceways, all their piping and a lot of their expertise, and we've been raising frogs there since 2000, actually. We used to go out and grab egg masses from the wild, bring them in, raise them in captivity until they get to be about a year old or past their vulnerable stages in life, and then set them free, which is called head starting. Fortunately now, and this release we did today was the first occasion where we were able to release frogs that were bred at the Pine Top facility, actually. We didn't have to take any eggs from the wild, so now we're a little bit more capable for using more sites and producing more eggs to be reintroduced in some of these areas. So that was one of the significant actions we took today, releasing frogs that were actually born at our propagation facility. And we also were able to release a couple of adult frogs that we've had for quite a few years. So we're hoping to jumpstart this population here using adult frogs, so maybe we could even have some breeding this year or next year. So usually it takes about 3 or 4 years to go from a tadpole stage to an adult stage at least. So during those 3 or 4 years, they're prone to a lot of predation, but by putting these adults out here right away, we're hoping to jumpstart again this process. And one of the frogs came from a population of frogs that were raised by Dr. Phil Fernandez, formerly at Grand Canyon University. Now he's at Glendale Community College. So we want to acknowledge Dr. Fernandez and all of his work, where he started this population back in the 90s.
Our captive facility did a fantastic job rearing the frogs, and so they were essentially ready to go.
Before the frogs could be released into clean waters, we needed to ensure that the frogs themselves were free of fungus. And what better way than to give them a bath?
The tadpoles were treated with a treatment of benzalkonium chloride solution, and the frogs were treated in an itraconazole solution. And these chemical baths are to essentially treat the frogs for to try to remove any fungal diseases that they might have, so that we're not transmitting any sort of diseases out into wild populations of amphibians, and just to make sure that we're putting clean frogs out there on the landscape.
Biologists hope that the frogs from this site will breed successfully and become a source population for stocking future waters.
These are Chiricahua leopard frogs. They're part of the Ranopipiens complex of random frogs, and they have been historically pretty common and were common well into the 1970s, but then started to decline. And we believe it's largely due to the spread of disease, what's known as the frog chytrid fungus. Also drought and habitat loss. A lot of our waterways have dried up, and so there's just a lot less habitat out there for the frogs.
A recovery team was created to help bring the species back from the brink of extinction. The team developed a recovery plan with the goal of recovering the species to the point where it can be removed from the endangered species list.
It'd be neat to be able to see them out there.
Well, we'll all get a chance to let some go. That'll be exciting. So as soon as Emily gets the pH, we'll start putting a little bit of water in to get them acclimated.
The plan includes releases of captive bred frogs, habitat restoration, and monitoring.
Just give them a little bit of time to transition over to the new, because it's not going to be exactly the same as the...
Until the 1970s, Chiricahua leopard frogs lived in ponds and creeks across central and southeastern Arizona. But populations have declined significantly since then due to drought, disease, habitat loss, and threats from non-native species.
But with this safe harbor agreement here, it opens up some flexibility in management, and some landowners have some assurances that if they help us out with some endangered species reintroductions, they're not going to be penalized in their land values or restrictions on land use or anything like that. Chiricahua leopard frogs were once found throughout southern Arizona and New Mexico and into Mexico, but the historic surveys done by our non-game branch in the 90s showed that they were still found in a few spots, but just more recent surveys have shown that they're gone from even those historic locations. So Fish and Wildlife Service decided they were too close to becoming endangered and actually listed them as threatened.
Some great
This introduction of Chiricahua leopard frogs is the first to occur as part of a new safe harbor agreement. The Safe Harbor program makes it possible for private and non-federal landowners to participate in the conservation of multiple wildlife species, including endangered Gila top minnow, desert pupfish, yaqui top minnow, and Quito pupfish by providing refuge sites.
The reason we were looking at a frog refugia area for the Chiricahua leopard frog is there's a demand to have frogs out there and to work with private landowners to establish some pond areas. The problem that we're having is we don't have enough frogs to supply that demand. And so setting up a refugia here and working with private landowners was really something that we needed to do as a department to promote and propagate the species.
The Safe Harbor program focuses on identifying ideal sites that will contribute the most to the recovery of the species. Finding suitable natural waters, sources of frogs, and the resources required to provide oversight after a release are the biggest challenges for the program and the recovery of the species. Since source populations for Chiricahua leopard frogs are limited, the department must be selective when choosing locations for enrollment in the Safe Harbor agreement. Only those locations with the highest potential to help recover this threatened species are selected as release sites.
Ideally, we're looking for areas that have permanent water sources that are not going to go dry in times of drought. We're also looking for properties that are near or adjacent to federal lands. That way, these frogs, once they get established on some of these private lands, they have an opportunity to move out onto our national forests and establish themselves in our other natural waterways. We're looking for places that have not been inundated with non-native species, whether it be bullfrogs or crayfish, that would kind of impair our ability to recover the frogs. So places that the frogs will do well out in the wild without very little active management where we can just allow them to be frogs and to reproduce and spread across the landscape.
The reintroduction was carried out through a cooperative effort between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Game and Fish, and the landowners. Funding assistance to prepare the site was provided by the Landowner Incentive Program, a grant program administered by Game and Fish on behalf of the Department of the Interior.
We work with private landowners, mostly building relationships. And the relationships are important to Game and Fish, mostly to work with the propagation of new species or to continue work with species that are threatened or endangered or species at risk.
We always have these ideas. We're going to come up and do a lot of work and do a lot of different things. And we wind up getting our coffee or our sodas or whatever and going and sitting on the porch and look at the pond and watching the birds and enjoying the animals and so forth up here. But now we're going to have an even bigger incentive to go down and sit down at the pond closer to be able to see if we can count frogs and see how many frogs we can see. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Cooperation between different partners is what has made the Safe Harbor program such a success. That same like-minded thinking is what's behind a new group that was created by the Arizona Game and Fish Commission to promote working together for the benefit of wildlife.
The people who are going to be clipping the wire on the poles, these work real well. Anybody cutting the regular barbed wire, this is the answer, or these. Okay? These can be used to pull the nails or the hooks or anything like that out.
Removing old cattle fencing from this section of the Coconino National Forest will make life a lot easier for the wildlife who live here. The Arizona Elk Society arranges a lot of fence removal projects like this one, but today, while fences are being torn down, important relationships were being built.
Basically, it started out as a work project for the Arizona Elk Society. This is an allotment that we purchased a permit on and retired to cattle grazing for the betterment of wildlife with all the threatened and endangered species in addition to elk. The department thought that it would be a good tie-in for their conservation workshop to be part of a little fence project removal and then go in and do their conservation workshop, and so far it's been a great success.
By the end of the weekend, this volunteer group will have removed about 5,000 pounds of wire and fence posts, clearing a 6-mile area of the dangerous barbed wire.
I do it for the passion of betterment of wildlife habitat. You know, I like to see the elk, I like to see the animals. You know, we go out there and we take a fence out of a riparian area and you don't think of it as much when you're doing it, but once you're done and you look back on it, it's pretty striking when you don't have that fence there. You know, I don't know what it is about fences, but you know, when they're gone, it just looks a lot better without them. You know, and then we know that we've done good for the animals as far as, you know, snagging on the strands. Most of the fence we've taken out today is down on the ground or twisted up pretty bad already, so it's a danger, it's a hindrance to wildlife movement.
This fence removal project has a special twist to it, which has nothing to do with wire ties. The project is working in conjunction with the Arizona Game and Fish Commission's Conservationist Committee. The committee was formed in 2008 and is chaired by Commissioner Jennifer Martin.
And the objective of the committee is to bring together some diverse stakeholder groups that historically have had some conflict or some perceived differences in what their objectives are. Some of the hunting clubs and some of the so-called environmentalist groups in the past haven't collaborated a great deal on the areas of common ground that they share, just because there's been so much conflict around the areas where they have different perspectives on policy. And so the Conservationist Committee was formed to get some of these diverse stakeholder groups together, identify what some of the areas of common ground are, and begin working together on the ground on some of those objectives. And so the committee started about a year ago. We've met several times and identified some areas of common ground, and today is the first time that we've actually gotten out in the field to do some work together.
After the work in the field was done, the committee members met so such diverse groups as conservationists and sportsmen can find ways to work together for the betterment of wildlife.
It has been fantastic so far. We have met 4 times to discuss legislative issues, working together to protect department budgets, and things like that. And actually, just by word of mouth, I've heard that, for example, in southern Arizona, some of the sportsmen's groups have been working with Sky Island Alliance and some other groups down south on a shooting range, because of course shooting ranges you know, support hunting interests, but some of the other clubs are also interested in them to keep wildcat shooting down. And so there are some other areas that we didn't even cover in any of our meetings that the groups are seeing for themselves are areas of common ground just from the interactions that have happened at the meetings that we've had. So it has been very successful so far, and this is a great way to get out and socialize a little bit more, since we've always met, you know, around a table in the context of a meeting before.
The Conservationist Committee will continue to grow and develop a better understanding of each other's needs. And nothing can help bring a group closer than rolling up 6 miles of barbed wire together.
Absolutely, absolutely. It promotes bonding for sure when you get some cuts and scrapes together.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department's Expo gets bigger and better every year. Come with us while we experience the sights and sounds of this year's event. It was a perfect March weekend as a record 35,000 people met for a weekend of fun at the 2009 Game and Fish Expo.
On the back of your clipboard, you'll see instructions on how to work your GPS unit.
Shattering last year's attendance of 26,000, the event is held at the Ben Avery Shooting Facility in Phoenix, just off I-17 at Carefree Highway. The expo features activities, demonstrations, and exhibits in the areas of hunting, fishing, recreational shooting, archery, off-highway vehicle and watercraft recreation, conservation and wildlife education, camping, and other outdoor recreation activities. Expo activities were held in 4 different locations throughout the facility, so you didn't miss a thing. Transportation was available throughout the facility. Always a favorite, participants got up close and personal with live wildlife. Hawks, small mammals, snakes, and lizards captured the imagination of kids of all ages. Attendees were kept in rapt attention while handlers exhibited the birds of prey.
How long do you think this guy will live? 50 years. How old, ma'am?
I don't know.
Take a guess.
20 years.
25. How long do you think he'll live?
Don't tell the kids, but they also learned a thing or two.
In the wild, 1 out of 4 birds of prey lives to be 1 year old.
While some kids dunked a line at the catch and release fish tank,
There you go, partner. All right.
others were learning casting techniques and gleaning fishing tips.
I'm going to go ahead and throw it a few times. It's a jackal flick-shaped worm. You'd fish it
They're
very
not going
similar
home empty-handed
to
from their
drop
next
shotting.
trip to the lake.
If you don't know what drop shot...
Onlookers watched in awe as the fire maker showed them how fire was started in the days before matches and Bic lighters.
There's our ember.
A few lucky ones even got the chance to try it out for themselves.
Excellent job. Give him a hand. Thanks, guys.
Another skill, almost as old as fire making, was also well attended. The archery classes were a big hit. Yeah, okay, bad pun. Another activity added this year was the Junior ROTC's air rifle competition. These young shooters definitely left their mark on the expo. The Ben Avery Shooting Facility is a world-renowned 5-star range that is listed as a Phoenix point of pride. For a nominal fee, people had the opportunity to try out firearms from companies like Sturm Ruger, Glock, and Smith & Wesson in a safe, controlled environment on the shooting range. People had the opportunity to test drive and check out the latest in off-highway vehicles. And not to be shown up by their four-wheeling friends, this year featured demonstrations by bicycle and motorcycle riders. One slip on those boulders, and that ride will come to a painful end. There were plenty of opportunities to dream about the next big boating trip, perched high in the captain's chair with the wind and the water gently blowing in their face. Always a favorite, spectators watched sporting dog demonstrations and received tips about how they could train their own dogs. And I can't even get my own dog to sit. Setting yet another first for the Expo, this year saw the first mounted cowboy action shooter competition in their very own arena. One of the founding fathers of the sport, Jim Rogers, was on hand for the inaugural shoot.
We have mounted shoots all over the United States, but this is the only arena in the entire United States that's dedicated exclusively to cowboy mounted shooting. No other equestrian events can be here, and that's been a problem for us because certain equestrian events don't like us. If they're doing the Shaw's match or a Western pleasure, the gunfire bothers the riders more than the horses, so we're just glad to have it here. People like Bob Morris and Grant McMaster and a whole bunch of others have made this possible. I started a shoot over here called Winter Range, and we had our first shoot right here in February of 1957. We had all of 3 shooters shooting in it. And since that time, our sport has grown literally to international prominence. We have shooters all over the world, Australia, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, and so forth. And right here this weekend, we've got over 100 shooters competing in this celebration. We're very proud to have our own mounted shooting arena dedicated to mounted shooting.
The arena was built with $50,000, raised by the Ben Avery Mounted Shooting Development Group and volunteer labor.
If you build it, they will come. Well, I built it, and here they are. We came to Ben Avery and worked with them for the last 3 years to be part of their master plan. We've been working on donated money, volunteer time, and we finally got that dream to come to fruition in what you see behind us here today. This is phase 1 of the world's only exclusively mounted shooting facility. We broke dirt on this facility 5 weeks ago. In 5 weeks, we've put about 3,500 man hours into this, all volunteer, $30,000, and here we are today. Got 108 shooters, I believe, and everybody seems to be having a good time. Our girls, who are in charge of kind of sprucing the place up, if you will, decided they wanted to put a sign up there and they wanted a backdrop. So we now have what we lovingly and affectionately call our box of rocks. And they wanted a box built 7 feet tall and 2 feet wide, or 2 feet deep and 20 feet long in a kind of a quarter circle. And they wanted it filled with Big River rocks.
Cowboy mounted shooters use single-action revolvers, firing blanks at balloons stationed around the arena. The action can be fast and furious, always a crowd pleaser. Ah, playing cowboy. Riding a horse and shooting guns, life doesn't get much better than that. When it was time to seek some cool shade and take a break from all the excitement, nearly 150 exhibitors, including sportsmen's conservation organizations, shooting clubs, government agencies, and commercial vendors of outdoor products and services, could be found under one of many tents. My personal favorite, and very theme appropriate, was the barbecue grill shaped like a gun. I really loved that grill. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let me cook a steak on it. Oh well, getting outdoors and experiencing outdoor recreation is a great way to spend time with friends and family. Plan on joining us at next year's Outdoor Expo to be held on March 27th and 28th, again at the Ben Avery Shooting Facility. Come on out. It's fun, it's free. That's a tough combination to beat. In our continuing series on Arizona sporting dogs, we introduce you to a real cutie that most people think of as a lap dog, instead of that scrappy field dog they were bred to be.
This is Penny. She is an 8-year-old party color American Cocker Spaniel. She's an international and American champion and has some field training. She's a good girl. Dogs, they're bred for flushing and retrieving small birds in low cover. So a lot of people use them for quail. They can be used for pheasants. A dog this size can easily pick up and retrieve a pheasant. I know a number of people that work with both a cocker and a larger retriever for flushing and retrieving, and they were bred to be hunted with on foot. They're a sturdy little dog. The standard is for them to be 14 inches tall for a female, 15 for a male. They are, but they're not a toy. They're a good-sized dog. Most the girls will weigh about 18 pounds. The boys weigh about 25. This temperament is typical of a cocker. Our standard says above all they must be merry. So this wagging tail is very, very typical, and they're pretty much a happy dog. They're a good family pet. They're obviously a pretty convenient size for houses. They're big enough and sturdy enough for small kids, and they fit well in a house. They are a moderate energy dog, so they can do fine with either moderate energy or moderate exercise in the yard or a short walk. They're pretty healthy. There's a lot of hair. Penny is in a puppy cut, which is how most people keep their dogs once they're no longer in conformation. They do require, they need a haircut every 4 to 6 weeks, and the more hair you keep them in, the more brushing is going to be required as well.
And that's our show for this evening. If you have any questions about anything you saw on the show, go to our website at azgfd.gov. On behalf of producers Gary Schaefer and Carol Lynn, I'm your host Jim Harkin. Thanks for watching.